The real genesis of the cocaine era in America long predates Operation Condor's official inception in 1976. It goes all the way back to January 1st, 1959 in Havana, Cuba, when the revolutionary forces of Fidel Castro seized total control of the island just 90 miles from the American coast. From the moment Castro took charge, American presidents wanted him gone, even if that meant assassinating him, which was a clear violation of the Geneva Convention. First it was President Eisenhower, then it was the Kennedy brothers.
Whatever his reasons, Castro stirs strong feelings of anger against the United States.
John F. Kennedy is often lauded for his handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but you need to know that the missile crisis was in part precipitated by Kennedy's disastrous plan to have the CIA secretly train and support a ragtag bunch of Cuban exiles, just like the Nicaraguan Contras in the 1980s, in an invasion of Cuba. The Bay of Pigs, as it came to be known, was a debacle. Cuban exiles landed and began to fight, but it quickly became obvious to the rest of the world that the U.S. was supporting them. In embarrassment at the illegal action, the skittish President Kennedy pulled American military air support from his Cuban allies, and they were quickly defeated and imprisoned by Castro.
And many of the participants in the Bay of Pigs were on that landing force, because I had known them personally in Cuba. And I had recommended on a number of occasions that such and such a person would be a good man to have in the brigade.
Fending off the United States made Fidel tremendously popular and cemented the bonds between Cuba and the Soviet Union. For the next 30 years, American intelligence engaged in various conspiracies, even involving the U.S. Mafia, to kill the cigar, his CIA nickname.
News Secretary Haggerty announces a break in diplomatic relations with Cuba.
There is a limit to what the United States in self-respect can endure. That limit has now been reached.
I am to this day absolutely convinced that we drove Fidel Castro into the arms of the Russian bear because he was frightened that we were going to murder him and destroy his new Cuba, and he was absolutely right.
They all failed. Over the last few years, the FBI and CIA have been releasing declassified documents that prove that these plots really did exist and they really did involve the mafia. As an interesting aside, Lee Harvey Oswald, JFK's assassin, was mixed up with the Cuban exile movement to overthrow Castro. He was even filmed passing out leaflets for the anti-Castro group Fair Play for Cuba by the FBI in New Orleans just a few months before he sniped Kennedy. This is important for our study here because of the tremendous involvement of the same Cubans trying to kill Castro in the South American drug smuggling business, protected, of course, like the Contras would be in the 80s, by the Central Intelligence Agency.
By 1970, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs realized that this Cuban connection was becoming the biggest drug importer into the United States of both cocaine and heroin.
June 21st, 1970, federal agents staged Operation Eagle, which they described at the time as the largest nationwide narcotics case in American history, arresting 135 people and seizing heroin and cocaine all across the U.S. Attorney General John Mitchell of Watergate fame was in charge of the operation. He said that the target was the largest ring of wholesalers in the United States, and they controlled 30% of all the heroin and 80% of all the cocaine sales in the United States. This was in 1970. Mr. Mitchell said that most of those arrested were Cuban refugees or Puerto Rican natives and that no mafia figures were involved.
And by 1972, 73, 74, this Cuban criminal organization that was working for the CIA and was given free passage to bring drugs into the United States.
By the early 80s, some researchers estimated that 3 out of 4 of the Cuban veterans of the Bay of Pigs who had made it back to Florida without being captured had been arrested or indicted on various criminal charges in the U.S., mostly for drug trafficking, and few of those Bay of Pigs veterans went to jail. In fact, more than 28,000 Cuban nationals convicted of felony crimes in the U.S. have not been deported back to Cuba since the early 60s. Of those, about 2,000 were involved in murders in Florida and other states, according to federal records.
The CIA operations against Castro and the Cubans, Faustian pact that the CIA had with Trafficante and his associates in the mafia, who were the ultimate recipients of the cocaine and distributors of it in the United States. And it's part of the same thing that's been going on since federal drug law enforcement was created and since the drug wars began. The government permits its allies to traffic, and it even provides them with protection through the CIA to bring their drugs into the country.
Perhaps the most important of these Bay of Pigs veterans was Felix Rodriguez, Ramon Millán's old crony, according to him.
Of all the figures to emerge from the Iran-Contra hearings, Felix Rodriguez remains the most shadowy. Rodriguez worked for the CIA in Vietnam and Latin America. At one point, he was assigned by the agency to assassinate Fidel Castro. His name continues to surface whenever anyone brings up allegations that seem to link George Bush to that illegal Contra operation. At the age of 48, a portly Felix Rodriguez is an unlikely figure to find still at the center of a shooting war. But that is where we found him. We rendezvoused with Rodriguez in El Salvador, where the Salvadorian army, backed by the U.S., is locked in a civil war against the communist rebels backed by Cuba.
CBS News has learned from drug enforcement officials that networks of other CIA veterans based in Miami have been actively involved in cocaine and marijuana smuggling for several years now.
And the ones that are really smart become CIA assets. That way they're protected. It's the best insurance. So that you get to run your organization and be protected. All you have to do is show that you can control the government or have government influence.
In a separate narcotics case in Florida, the crackdown involves defendants with old links to the Central Intelligence Agency.
One of the traffickers is a pillar of Miami's Cuban community. He spent more than 5 years with the CIA running operations in and out of Cuba, to smuggling drugs from Latin America to southern Florida. The Miami police are in the process of arresting more than 50 people in one of the city's largest drug busts ever. Is a scheduled arrest of 7 men who police investigators say are veterans of the CIA's war on Cuba.
On all of these operations that they did in Cuba, they practiced them in the Florida Keys and then the coast of Florida first.
Rodriguez, by his and the U.S. government's own admission, was sent to Bolivia to aid in the hunt for Che Guevara. For those of you who only know of Che from t-shirts worn by rich capitalist celebrities, he was Fidel Castro's closest associate once upon a time. But not long after Fidel came to control Cuba, Che was deemed too radical for the revolution, and he spent the last part of his life moving around various third world countries, adventuring and trying to foment revolution. Felix Rodriguez was there when Che was executed, and rumors around Miami is that he kept one of Che's hands or several fingers as a trophy, which he would show off.
It was very challenging when they mentioned that Che Guevara was there. He was an assassin, he was an adventurer, he was an individual who had very little regard for life. He enjoyed killing people.
Bolivia, with its poor population and strong unions, was considered ripe for communism, which is why Che Guevara was there, and why CIA asset Felix Rodriguez was there. Bolivia is also the heartland of the coca plant, and in the late 70s it became a key part of Operation Condor in the CIA's so-called anti-communist operation south of the border.
The Minister of Cocaine is the central figure in the most lucrative cocaine operation in the world, in Bolivia. His name is Luis Arce Gomez.
If this is true, where is the proof? These are nothing but allegations directed against me personally and against my government. We are absolutely certain in our own minds that they are merely a fabrication.
I was dealing with the people who were running most of the cocaine on earth. I was dealing face to face at that time. The Mafia Cruceña, which was Roberto Suarez.
We asked Colonel Arce Gomez whether his cousin Roberto Suarez is a drug dealer.
As Minister of the Interior at this moment, I cannot tell you whether he has anything to do with drugs or not. It's a confidential matter. and to discuss it would cut across the investigation now underway.
It begins with an informant walking into the embassy in Argentina. We call her Lucy. And I was only there a short time. And she walks into the embassy, asks to speak to me, comes up and looks at me and says, "I'm going to give you the biggest case DEA ever heard of." I didn't even know who she was. She was close to the Minister of Agriculture of Bolivia. He was the right-hand man for Suarez. She's telling me this man controls all the cocaine on earth. He said, and he deals mostly with Colombians, and he wants to stop dealing with them. They're killers, they're thugs. He's a businessman, doesn't like dealing with them.
This is Santa Cruz, home city to General Echeverria and Colonel Coca. It was here last May that the DEA mounted what was to be their biggest ever drug sting. The target, seen here in a DEA sketch, Roberto Suarez, cousin of Colonel Arce Gomez.
Most of the cocaine on the face of the earth started out as coca paste. They call it pasta básica in Spanish. Pasta básica was the best anywhere in Bolivia, and they were very proud of this. The pasta básica, they would sell almost all of it to Colombia. Colombia would convert the pasta básica to cocaine hydrochloride, and they would distribute it all over the world, mostly going to the U.S. at that time. But the source of most of the cocaine in the U.S. was Bolivia. I was able to get the help of the Bolivian government. Lydia Gala was the president of Bolivia at that time, to bring down the Roberto Suarez organization.
There is a mafia running that province, and there is a general there with a strong army influence and troops and bases and transportation.
We cannot be involved in the drug trafficking business for one reason. We are upright people, and we always tell the truth. When you tell the truth and people hold some kind of grudge against you, it's often the case that you will be the target for attack.
The first thing that we'll call her Lucy did was brings Marcelo Ibanez, the Minister of Agriculture for Bolivia, down to Buenos Aires, where we have a week of meetings. I mean, I couldn't be Miami Vice bullshit smart. I had to really know, because these are now not thugs. Roberto Suarez, high-level businessman, very cool, very calculating. If they want to kill you, they do like they did with me after it all went down. They offer money all over the place to hitmen to come. You know, my game was, I'm with the American mafia. My role was I passed off as a half Puerto Rican, half Sicilian. The emissary to South America. I just got over really well. I was expressing fears of going to Bolivia because of DEA. You don't understand. He said, Roberto, they call him El Comandante. El Comandante, he said, the people love him. He feeds the people. He feeds the people. Yeah, I read that. You'll be taken care of. You don't have anything to worry about.
On May 18th, an old commuter plane carrying DEA agents posing as big mafia buyers left Florida for Bolivia. 3 days later, at a jungle airstrip, it picked up 850 pounds of cocaine base. Street value, $300 million in the United States. The supplier, Roberto Suarez, the cousin of Colonel Arce Gomez.
They didn't want to authorize anything because he's not in the computer. Nobody knew who. The man was a few months away from taking over a country, controlling the world's drug trafficking. He wasn't in our computer. The case goes down. People try to kill the case.
While DEA undercover agent Michael Levine was trying to break the Bolivian supply chain, the Bolivian government was overthrown by military officials backed by Roberto Suarez and other drug dealers. The leader of this paramilitary operation was a wanted Nazi war criminal named Klaus Barbie, aka the Butcher of Lyon, France, where as chief of the Gestapo he oversaw the murder of tens of thousands of people. Barbie escaped to South America after the war, probably as a part of Operation Paperclip, the American and British system of ferreting Nazis across the Atlantic whom they thought might be of help during the coming conflict with the Soviet Union. During the 50s, Barbie had set himself up in business across South America, providing training and support for right-wing governments. When Roberto Suarez and his allies decided to totally overthrow the government of Bolivia, Klaus Barbie was placed in charge of the paramilitary.
then, in the middle of this, the first thing that happens is Lucy comes in. She says, the Yankees are all around my family's house. They're calling me. She gets on the phone to Bolivia. They're screaming and crying. I say, Yankees? They're Germans. These were Klaus Barbie's people. They call them Yankees. Because Cokaine Coup was happening right at that moment. Klaus Barbie worked directly for the Roberto Suarez organization. He was their security. Then eventually he worked for the government of Bolivia. He was their Klaus Barbie's people put together the whole revolution. Escaped Nazi war criminal, part of the CIA rat line. You know, the CIA did so much to really screw America. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
There's more coca being grown than coffee. People are pulling the coffee plants out of the ground and putting in coca.
In any case, the DEA undercover aircraft landed safely back in Miami and unloaded the biggest haul in the history of drug enforcement. So much cocaine that it had to be taken away by pickup truck.
Within DEA, they try to kill the case. They wanted, my own head of operations in South America even says to me, he says, more people, they're trying to destroy the case. They don't want to see it go down. I said, that doesn't make sense. He said, I don't know. He said, that's what's happening. They're trying to destroy the Suarez case. Case goes down anyway. We make first, this is the first time an undercover plane goes into the jungles of Bolivia, comes out with a load of cocaine, never done before. They believed I had a lab in Miami, and this was a test run of 500 kilos of pasta basica, base. Had they done the deal the right way, we buy it, and we go back for more.
That day, Mr. Suarez called us from Santa Cruz, called us on an undercover phone here at the DEA office, and stated that he was calling from the Air Force headquarters in Santa Cruz, Bolivia.
We had the money already in a safety deposit box in a bank in Kendall, Florida. And Gutierrez and Jose Roberto Gassa, from probably the richest, most powerful family in Bolivia, they were going to take the money back to, the drugs are in the air. Now I'm getting called from Suarez himself.
The payment to Suarez, $9 million in cash, was due to be collected from a South Miami bank once the plane was airborne. But the man who came to collect it in Miami wasn't Suarez. Instead, he was an emissary, Alfredo Gutierrez, former president of the Santa Cruz Chamber of Commerce. The DEA filmed him as he walked into the bank. He was arrested and held in Miami jail on $3 million bond. Within days, 9 affidavits from Bolivia were filed in Miami court testifying to Gutierrez's good character, and as a result, his bond was reduced to $1 million.
2 world-class drug dealers walk out of Miami Bank with $8 million. They're busted. The U.S. Attorney, Pat Sullivan, who later prosecuted Noriega, which is a joke, but he immediately drops charges on Jose Roberto Gassa. Dropped all charges.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Scott Miller.
Affidavits from Bolivia were brought up here in Mr. Gutierrez's behalf. One of the affidavits was from General Echeverria.
All of these people testify that Alfredo Gutierrez was a man of good reputation who would not skip bail.
That's correct.
And he skipped.
He skipped.
I'm sending, at this point, I'm back in Argentina just sending cables. How do you drop charges on the biggest drug trafficker who at that point ever lived? How? I'm in the bank vault, and I said, you want me to help you get the money out? You want me to help launder the money? And they said, oh no, we have legitimate businesses. There's no problem. We put it right into the business. And what more do you need to convict these guys? But no, they don't. They drop charges on Jose Roberto Gassa. I'm free. And I'm getting cables that they're offering money to kill me.
So Roberto Suarez is controlling the Bolivian cocaine fields, which is the center of cocaine production in the world. Now guess who Suarez has working for him as a security consultant? None other than the butcher of Leon, Klaus Barbie.
General Luis Garcia Mesa became president in 1980, was reportedly paid $1 million by the drug mafia to leave them alone. He's now in exile in Argentina, where it is said he is still making money on drugs.
After the coup, drug dealers loyal to the Suarez coalition were released from prison, and anyone that had challenged them or supported the union movement were killed, tortured, or imprisoned. 140 rival drug dealers to the Suarez monopoly were killed, alongside common workers who had simply done things like gone on strike to protest low wages and dangerous conditions in the Bolivian mining industry, controlled, of course, by American corporations. I led the coup. The U.S. gave its approval. It's a pity that people died, but there are people that are worthless and should die. The guide of the paramilitary was Klaus Barbie. It was a force that replaced the military. A quote from Colonel Luis Arce Gomez, Bolivian military commander. So this tale of European mercenaries overthrowing Bolivia on behalf of coca barons probably sounds crazy to some people, but there's pictures. DEA agent Michael Levine's informant, in fact, a woman codenamed Lucy, who was part of the Bolivian government, actually called Levine on the phone as her house was being surrounded by the fiancés of death, as Barbie's men were called. I researched what happened to a few of the fiancés of death. One was a man named Joachim Fibelkorn. Fibelkorn was kicked out of the German military in the 1970s and moved to Bolivia, where he opened a bar named Bavaria. Klaus Barbie recruited Fibelkorn to be a part of the Fiancés of Death. I found a long article written in 1983 for Der Spiegel, the German equivalent of Time magazine. Turns out that Joachim Fibelkorn, after the Bolivian narco government began to fall apart, went back to Germany and began to work for the narcotics police there, even setting up at least one of his fellow Fiancés of Death in an undercover cocaine sale inside a German shopping mall. 1983 was the same year that Jewish Nazi hunters captured Klaus Barbie and returned him to France to stand trial for his crimes during World War II. And he eventually died in a French prison. Another fiancé of death, Stefano Della Chiaia, was an Italian-born neo-fascist. He was a friend of Licio Gelli, Grand Master of the Propaganda Due Masonic Lodge, which is at the center of Italian corruption, and it counted one of its members as the so-called banker to God, Roberto Calvi, who was later found dead, drowned in London. Chiaia was arrested himself and put on trial for involvement in several terror bombings that occurred in Italy from the 1960s through the 80s. He was eventually acquitted and became active in formal Italian politics until the early 1990s. Della Chiaia testified against Klaus Barbie, naming him as Roberto Suarez's security chief and military leader of the Bolivian cocaine coup.
We next cut to my house in Buenos Aires, and I'm fighting with the secret police from Argentina to allow Hurtado Candia, to allow him to leave the country so we could continue this drug deal, which goes right into the same people. The Argentine secret police, and these are killers, these are serial killers. The same people I'm talking to were the same people doing the desaparecidos. They were killing people, they had lists. So I'm talking to these same people about how they have to let Hurtado Candia leave Argentina because they want to kill him. That's basically what they do. You know, Hurtado Candia, I could see like some of the waiters who came with service, I knew they were Argentine cops. And they're checking out his Rolex watch, they're checking out, they're already cutting it up in their mind, it's all going. And so I'm reading into this. That's why the first thing I did when he left the hotel was got these guys on the phone. I said, come to my house. You have to let this guy, you're not going to kill this guy. And they did. They showed up at my house because I had them on salary. One night we're at my house and I would get them Chivas Regal and they'd watch porno. It was my job. And they had to go out and kill people. And they had a couple of drinks and one of them says to me, que venga con nosotros, Levine. Si no te importa, que venga con... If it won't bother you, come with us. They wanted me to come along for the murders. So I'm talking to these same people about how they have to let Hurtado Candia leave Argentina because they want to kill him. The leader of this group, who they call Mario. In fact, I'm not sure I ever knew his real name. You know, we had him registered as a snitch, but anyway, Mario He said, you know, Lavina, he said, don't you, the right hand in your country doesn't know what the left hand is. Don't you know CIA is protecting these guys? And I know Mario works for CIA too. Because I would see, we'd come in and you go to the CIA office and he'd come to me. So he's on their payroll, he's also on mine. And Mario says, we're working to protect these guys. What they were doing is they were then supporting the revolution. In fact, the cops came in and wanted to get paid for killing from me, to get paid for killing these, and they brought the photos. I have the photos still. What am I going to do with it? You think anybody is going to believe this shit?
Late last year, the minister visited Washington to win friends in the incoming Reagan administration and to try to obtain recognition for Bolivia's military government headed by General Garcia Mesa, who had seized power in a coup last July. Washington sources say the dismissals were aimed at improving Bolivia's image with the Reagan team in the hope that U.S. economic and military aid to Bolivia, which had been cut off by President Carter, will be resumed by President Reagan.
They never contacted me, but Internal Affairs did. I thought I'm an American, that my country's going to line up behind me and protect me, and we're doing God's work. I'm out at the forefront of this. And then I'm under investigation. They really try to put me in jail for anything, false accusations, one after the other, but that doesn't mean anything in DEA. And I'm fighting for my life at that point. That's when they forced transfer me out of Argentina. I wanted to stay, but I had served my whole tour.
This rare film shows Suarez's daughter Haiti, an ex-Miss Bolivia, enjoying some of her father's profits. Roberto Jr., in the background, was tried for drug smuggling last year in Miami and was acquitted. We asked Colonel Zapata, he knows where Suarez is, why doesn't he go get him?
That's a beautiful question. Since Suarez is as strong as the narcotics police, maybe you should ask the armed forces why they haven't arrested him.
So we did ask the Army. General Lucio Áñez, Chief of Staff of the Bolivian Armed Forces.
I also don't know why Suarez is still free. Constitutionally, the armed forces are not in charge of narcotics.
And if the government should strike hard, what's to prevent Suarez and friends from sparking another coup as they did in 1980? In fact, Suarez has threatened to take action, whatever that means, if the authorities lean on him.
In a recent show of cooperation with Washington's anti-drugs effort, the Bolivians arrested Roberto Suarez, the man who started the Bolivian cocaine industry. In an interview with CBS News before his arrest, Suarez accused Bolivian government officials of involvement in the drug trade.
Well, you know that there are corruptible people at many different levels. I don't mean to say by this that it reaches the president of our republic, but it reaches some of his collaborators.
Is there an Illuminati? If you mean, are there people who secretly exert great forces on world events that we don't know about, then yes. Yes, there is an Illuminati. And this is one of them. His name is John McCone, the Central Intelligence Agency and president of the ITT Corporation, once one of the 10 largest corporations on Earth. McCone was accused of being a war profiteer after the Second World War, but was still appointed chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, a position he used to maneuver himself into becoming head of the CIA under President John F. Kennedy. In 1964, Brazil's democratically elected left-wing government, which had been taking over and seizing American businesses, was overthrown in a violent coup d'etat. At the time, the CIA denied any involvement. Today, the CIA admits it helped the Brazilian military overthrow the democratically elected government, and guess who was CIA director at the time? Our friend John McCone.